It is 7:30 once again on the third Thursday of the month, and the Village of Mountains Edition council meeting will come to order. We are going to depart a little bit from our usual schedule here. Residents' comments will be coming up after we have a report, two reports here on traffic studies. But first, we will have our weather report in the middle of this gorgeous weather.
I noticed everybody's in such a good mood.
It's
Wonder why.
It's short sleeves.
Welcome
shorts.
to a preview of summer without the humidity.
Yes.
Oh,
But it's not going to last long. It's going to get cooler. We might have some rain on Sunday, which we need desperately, but it looks like we may be going into a pattern in May doesn't look too good. Cold, rain, wind, but we need the rain.
We do.
Now, people have asked me about, the fact that it's been so hot. We're breaking temperatures. The last 2 days, we've broken temperatures at all three major airports and at other stations around the metropolitan area in the low 90s. And again, without the humidity. And people keep thinking that we're going to have a hot summer because of that reason. And I want to tell you right now, every summer and, it's hot and humid here. But that does not portend a hot summer. For instance, in 1976, it was 95 degrees on April the 18th, which was Easter Sunday. And we had like 5 days in a row of temperatures in the 90s. It never got to 95 again the whole rest of the summer. And that was followed by probably the second coldest winter, fall and winter ever here. So enjoy it while you got it now. My time is up. I thank you for yours.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Keith. The next item is a study of the traffic numbers and speeds that was conducted recently. And I asked the traffic group who conducted it, and Paul Dorr in particular, I happen to have some old studies from some of the same streets. And I wanted to see whether the putting in speed bumps and other things have made a difference over the years. I think you'll see it has in some regards, but perhaps not in others. So Paul, why don't you take a look, tell us about everything that you found.
Sure. Can everyone hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Yes, Michael shared the Joe Kutro report with me, and I've reviewed that. And again, that information was collected back in 2011. And that data actually did show that the speeds that were gathered at the time were higher back then. And, they were 6-7 miles above the speed limit, both on Cummings Lane and actually on Shepherd Street. And the volumes were actually also heavier, which means you had more cut-through traffic. So our study we just completed in March, early March, and we conducted 3 speed studies along both Cummings and Shepherd Street. And the results from our, I can share my screen here. Let's see, share my screen. Yep. Share, and I'll open up my summary sheet here. So what we did is we, again, we conducted both directions. So we separated by direction. And again, three locations on Cummings and three on Shepherd. If we can go through Cummings Lane first. So closer to Brookville was our first location. And what we ended up with was 19 mile per hour, 85th percentile speeds in both directions. And compared to the 2011, we were about 23, 24 mile per hour on those, that ballpark, about the same location. I don't know exactly where the location was from the 2011 study. But then middle between the 2 existing speed bumps that's located out there today, we had 18 and 19 westbound and eastbound, and then 19 and 20 closer to Brennan Lane. and that's actually posted 20 mile per hour. And as I explained to Michael when we first logged on, we had this shown at 25 miles per hour. It is not signed. I was just going through the data. It's actually 20 miles per hour. So again, if I could just, can everyone see me again? Okay. If I could just go through some of the numbers. So again, the speeds are down now versus 2011, and the cut-through amount of traffic is down as well. And one of the things we look at when we look at cut-through traffic, we determine how many homes are actually located on the street, and we look at what that trip generation would be on a daily basis. And when you look at trip generation, you have parents taking their children to school, folks going to work, you got trash, you got mail delivery, you got Uber Eats, you got FedEx, you got UPS, and of course we got Amazon. I'm not sure about your neighbors, but some of my neighbors, they get packages many times throughout the day. So again, we looked at that cut-through traffic, the total volumes in both directions, and those volumes are very reasonable when you talk about the number of homes and you talk about the trip generation rates. So I think if I can ask, since 2011, the speed humps actually were installed. They weren't there before.
That's correct. Yes.
Okay.
So correct.
Paul, sorry to interrupt, but you're still sharing your screen. I think we might be getting some feedback.
Okay. Are you seeing my data or are you seeing myself?
You're seeing yourself.
So
okay.
Is there a button on the bottom with the blue button that says stop sharing?
Oh, stop sharing. Yes. Thank you for that.
There you go. Okay.
Thanks, Ron.
So yeah, again, your speeds are down in both directions. Your volumes are down. And I truly believe, and actually based on the 2011 study, there was no need for mitigation back then. And now our speeds are lower and our cut-through traffic is lower. I do not recommend additional speed humps or any other types of traffic calming. Now, I was working with Michael at one point up on the, not the Brookville side, the other side, of possibly doing a bump out. And if I can just explain that a little bit, what happens during the day when there's no parked cars along a street, what happens is your speeds will be higher because there's no parked cars. Parked cars narrow up the street, and it gives you a sense of the road being a little bit more narrow. So that on that east side of your neighborhood, we wanted to do something at the entryway to just choke that point down a little bit. And we had some alternatives, and I can happily go back and look at that, just that point on the east side of the neighborhood. But other than that, I think everything's great. I don't make any changes as far as I'm concerned with speeds. If you have any questions.
Well, that's all very good to know. That says some of our actions did have the intended effect.
I have a quick question, Paul.
Sure.
The bump out you mentioned, is that a curb extension?
Yeah.
So
Okay. I thought so.
It normally is, but we designed it in a way that it would have a curb on the backside of the landscape area, so we can keep existing drainage flowing, and you can either have landscaping in there, or it could actually be concrete. The whole purpose is just to narrow that area.
Right.
Good, thank you. Thank you. Any other questions, comments from council?
I think the only comment, I know that I'm not sure I see it here, but we have some installed on Turner, and it would be interesting to know what that impact might be, but that is not for this discussion, but
Okay.
I'd be curious. I mean, I feel that it's made an impact, but
Yeah, in fact, the criticisms that we get of the speed bumps is that they're inconvenient, they slow you down. And I said, that's not a bug, that's the feature. That's what they're designed to
That's true. Yes.
And it does seem to have worked. Thank you. If you could just stay for a few moments, we have comments coming up from our residents, and they may have some questions for you.
Sure.
But as turn to the residents' comments, I just want to note, take a walk down Brookville and you will see real concrete new sidewalks put in. I told the site manager down there, I never thought I would ever say that the concrete looked beautiful. But after 5+ years, it really does. They're doing a great job. They're very attentive to the details, the inevitable, unexpected things that come up. Michael will be talking about this later. But I just want to put in my 2 cents here that it looks great and it looks like it's going well. So with that, let me turn to the residents. I see Jean has her hand up.
Hi, can you hear me? Hi.
Yeah, you're good.
Hi, I'm. You can hear me. There are a few people that can't hear me. I have a question. How do you define cut? How do you figure out what's cut through traffic? I mean, you don't take license plates numbers. They live here in Martin's Additions. I've lived here. I'm embarrassed to tell you how long I've lived here. Okay, but I've lived here for a very, very long time. And what I have witnessed, because I'm just a couple houses off of Brookville Road, is I can't get into my driveway. I have to sit back on Brookville and wait because people pull over in front of my driveway. How do you figure out what's cut through traffic? Because I also think about what actions the county's taken, what changes have been made to Beach Drive and other ways of getting between here and Western Avenue and down into DC. How do you figure out whether it's cut through or not? Because just personal experience has been, it is significant that this is people getting from point A to point B and they don't live here. So spill.
Right. So we do actually do license plate tracking, on one end to the other, but we did not do it on this end, on this particular data collection. As I mentioned, a certain number of homes, and particularly I believe on your street, let's say there's 60 homes. Now I know that's not within Villages of Martin's Addition, but they're still on your same street. So if they have deliveries, food, going to school, going to work, those number of homes are going to generate a certain amount of traffic every day. And we know what that is based on the number of homes. And what we are saying is based on that, the amount of cars that we track both east and west along these 2 streets. And when we do the math, based upon that number of homes, it seems reasonable. If it was, let's say, double the amount of trip generation for that number of homes, then we would say, hey, you have a cut-through traffic problem. And it could be just on these days that, half of your neighborhood or, half of the residents on Cummings and Shepherd just didn't go anywhere. They just happened to be home and those other cars are cut through traffic. But again, if we add up all the homes and we look at the trip rates, the numbers are very reasonable.
So you're basing it on a statistical model of typical behavior.
Correct.
Right. Okay.
Yes.
Okay, so you're taking the number of houses and saying an average number of a house gets 5 trips a day, and you're doing the multiplication.
Yes. Well, it's actually
I'm stretched to think that then becomes a measure of whether or not we're seeing more cut through traffic. Have you thought about what changes have been made in county roads and state roads that access other jurisdictions or other areas in our neighborhood that would have forced more cars onto our streets? Because I can see it.
On other studies, I will actually monitor what goes on the state and county roads adjacent to a neighborhood property like this. And if based on the numbers, I felt you had a cut through traffic, I would certainly tell you that you have you live there, you see, and I will tell you every day that we do traffic counts, typically it's very close This is just 1 week. We looked at 7 straight days, and the amount of traffic cutting through the neighborhood for those 7 days in both directions is very, very close. Again, we do this all the time, and I've seen streets in your neighborhood. We have recommended speed humps up on the north end of your street, Thornapple, I believe it was. You definitely had cut through traffic there, and you had speeding issues there, and those numbers were very high, both speed and volume. On Cummings Lane and on Shepherd Street, we don't have again, the data that I have from this 7-day study do not support a heavy cut through traffic, and your observations may be different, of course.
Okay, thank you.
I just wanted to piggyback on what Gene was raising. I'm assuming there's a standard approach to what's defined as cut through, because I mean there's Brennan Lane, there's Lower Turner, there are so many different streets that people need to get through Shepherd or Cummings to get through. I mean, so it's not just Shepherd that you're considering the neighborhood for purposes of the data, or is it just Shepherd from Martin's Additions down to Rollingwood?
That's correct. And in my summary, to Michael, those nearby streets that are, they're fed off of Brookville, through Cummings and down Shepherd, those streets on the east, that traffic has to come down one of these streets to get to Brookville. So those homes are also added into the amount of traffic that you have, again, east and west along those streets. Again, what we use is International Traffic Engineers. It's called ITE rates. And I can tell you, based on how many seats in a movie theater, how many square feet of office space, every different type of use, I can tell you what traffic is generated on a daily basis, on a peak hour basis. And based upon a residential home neighborhood, we know what that would be. And unfortunately, it's 10 trips per day per house. So that's where we come up with that number of trips.
All right. Okay, Mark, I see a hand up. For this or any other subject?
This subject.
Okay, go ahead.
I was interested in how you calculate the local trips, because in our neighborhood, a lot of people work at home. They're not making trips to the office. I'm one of them. My wife's another. My neighbors are another. My neighbors across the street are the other. So I wondered whether that number is accurate. The other thing I was wondering about is, did you do anything about running stop signs? Because people run the stop sign at Brennan and Shepherd every day. And delivery people, taxi people, Amazon people, every day. I see it every single day.
Hey, Mark.
And they're doing that. They're speeding, right?
Hey, Mark. This is Michael. I just want to mention that stop sign you're talking about is not within the village limits. So that's not a part of this study or our jurisdiction at all.
That makes sense, but it still raises an issue, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Maybe we should have stop signs on our side, or a speed bump right against that barrier. But it's for another conversation, another time. I just thought it should be thought about.
So to answer your question, we did not look at any stop sign running. We just looked at the speed and the volumes. And again, when we say the trip generation for the street and the number of homes, that is an average. And I'm not sure if based on, more people may be working at home, but maybe more people's buying Amazon, more people having more deliveries, those things. I will say if it was myself cutting through your neighborhood and have to deal with 3 speed humps, and these are all, Montgomery County type gradual speed humps, but they do really slow you down. and our speed numbers between the speed humps confirms that, you have a 5 or 6 mile per hour difference now from what you had before the speed humps are in. So the speed humps are working. And one more additional thing, up at Thornapple, when I did the study up there, in order to install the speed hump up on Thornapple, there was police actually out at the intersection, the stop control that you guys have. And he was actually monitoring who was running that particular stop sign. So you can request more police presence at your stops. And I also recommended they do a flash stop. They're fairly inexpensive. Yeah. And it does bring more attention to the stop control.
Yeah, Paul, I think the traffic group recommended those one time before. Are they? They're expensive, but are they effective?
They are, and adjacent neighborhoods, like the town of Somerset. The town of Somerset has a couple, and they're actually installing a few more in the other direction. They have done studies, and they actually do. People are driving, they're thinking about work, they're thinking about their children. Sometimes they're not really just thinking. Having the flashing stop, especially on a brand new sign, sometimes it does reduce the number of people drifting through the intersection or just literally ignoring it.
Good. Okay, thank you. Marty Langeland.
There, can you hear me?
Yep.
Yes. Okay, thank you guys. And Paul, I have a question for you about whether Montgomery County is now allowing camera-enforced stop signs. I know DC has had them for years. Is that an option now in Montgomery County that we can have camera-enforced stop signs? Thank you, by the way, for the speed humps on Thornapple. They have helped.
Sure.
That's where I live. But what about cameras? Can we get camera enforcement on the stop signs?
In the manner that your neighborhood would issue a ticket or a warning, or the county would?
Well, the county probably would. We would issue a ticket. The county would enforce it.
I'm unaware of that, but I could certainly look into it and get back to Michael, and Michael can share my response after I contact the county or the state.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Yeah.
Normally, they have to be within a certain distance from a school zone, and we actually do those studies to determine if school zones are allowed to do it. So there's normally school related, but I can double check that.
I think the answer is Maryland law does not currently allow, but a pilot program has been approved for Baltimore and Tacoma Park, I believe, just this last legislative session.
Okay.
Oh, thank you, Ron. That's encouraging. Can we be part of the mini pilot?
Okay. I have a comment or a question or query from a colleague here.
Yeah, thanks so much. This will be quick, probably rhetorical, but Gene, thanks for always spurning extra thoughts in your comments. And so, again, this gets into that gray area of data and catchment and what qualifies as cut through versus not. And I just share, if you look at, obviously, we've got a state road here. The traffic flow on that, I would be incredibly curious about that flow. And if we ever, I'm not saying we finance it. I mean, as you may not know, I'm treasurer, so I'm not going to sign a check necessarily for a large, expensive study, but it would be very interesting to know the license plates, because, anyone who comes either in the morning or by, late afternoon, it's packed. And the question is, who's cutting through here to go somewhere else? And again, that wouldn't necessarily be a cut through because it's a state road, but I would gather it's quite significant.
Most. Okay, thank you, Jeff. I see no further questions from comments, queries. So thank you, Paul, for your study. And I'm sure we will be getting back to you for other stuff in the future. You've been helpful over the last several years. So now we come to our stormwater task force that has been working for several years now. We have a final report from the contractor, and we have a set of recommendations from the committee itself. So I see several members of the task force here. Who wants to speak? Who's
I'll
not?
lead. I'll lead. And, but we've divided up the work between, Yasmin
Okay,
and myself.
who's first?
Mark, I'm here in person, Jackie Roberts.
Oh,
Okay,
hi. I'm so
Hi.
glad.
Yeah.
Please jump in as
who's
often
first?
as
Are
you
you
want.
first?
Yeah, Mark's,
I'm just,
Mark's gonna
well,
lead.
I'm setting it up.
Okay, go ahead.
So just as a brief hello, I want to say that on behalf of the task force and people here today, we wish to thank the council members and the village manager for supporting us to deliver the best to our ability this investigation, analysis, and determination of possible remediation action. It's been an honor to do this. We've been working with 4 of the council members since October 16th, 2023, which makes today my 2-year and 8-month anniversary. And they've always been very supportive. We've not had the opportunity to work too much with Alexa Spencer, but we look forward to doing that tonight. With so much on their plates, it's been amazing how much support we've received. I'm hoping that the report and the action plan we're presenting meet your expectations. It's not really our report so much as it's a community report. We've had support from task force members, past and present. We've had support from the council, the village manager, residents, staff, and neighbors, and people with special knowledge. There's a whole bunch of support that's been put into this. I want to thank my task force members, Nick Mitchell, Yasmina Madaris, Elizabeth Goldberg, and Jackie Roberts. And I want to thank Michael Silliman, but also Arthur and Jeff, who have Blander, who have worked with us on a regular basis to make this report work. And I want to thank our former members, Camille Wall, Philip Hurst, Joe Klicksberg, and Gene Sperling. I also want to thank 150 residents who responded to our survey, dozens of residents who allowed us to inspect their properties and came outside to talk with us about their concerns, issues, and history. I want to thank Balin and Megan Bernia, the engineer, and her staff, who did an amazing job of making this a very professional and reliable report. And even Jason Azar, who worked with us to educate us at the beginning. I want to thank the village managers and staff from Chevy Chase sections 3 and 5, the village of Chevy Chase and Chevy Chase View and Somerset, all of whom provided support and help in developing our reports. So the council's going to have a lot of questions, I assume. There are not as many residents as I would have hoped. We had a great turnout for the last meeting, but maybe we wore them out. I don't know. But if there are resident questions, we ask that they be held till the end of our presentation so we can move through it quickly. So let's start with the basic facts that are demonstrated in the report and documented and supported. Our stormwater drains and sewers and pipes are old, too small, don't carry enough volume. There are too few, and those that we have are inadequate. There are streets that have none. Stormwater management challenges have increased over the years. There's been a lot of development in our community. This has helped to overwhelm our sewer system that was already inadequate. There are larger houses and additions which are reducing non-permeable surfaces and trees that absorb water, and that has helped to overwhelm our sewer system and to discharge runoff onto neighboring properties. More land is paved, that's increased water runoff. There are less permeable surfaces, that's less absorption of water runoff. Their floodings are not just neighbors, but their yards, their basements, there's our sidewalks, our streets. All of this is challenging, and it's not going to get any better the data that was shared with us shows that over the last several years, the volume and rate of waterfall during a storm has increased substantially, so that we get what essentially used to be an hour of water falling onto our lands to which now falls in 10 minutes. And that means the system can't handle it. We have the problem of the county permit office wavering system, which publicly has been stated is basically you buy a waiver when the state law says that it should be done on a case-by-case basis and hardship. So what the report speaks for itself. We believe strongly that the village has to take care of itself now. What we've done with the action plan is tried to organize this process for you to get you as the council and neighbors to get your arms around it. And we're here today to answer your questions. We recommend that. Well, we want to let you understand that that we need a stormwater management plan, and we've identified the 6 interrelated and mutually supporting tasks, which must be coordinated and consistent in order to do that. We feel that, based upon our own experience and observations, no one person can implement this plan by themselves. We think Michael is an amazing village manager, but this is going to be so much work that we want the council to provide him with support in the form of volunteers in a community. Maybe he runs the program directly, maybe he's ex officio, maybe you guys can figure that out. But we want to give him some additional hands and bodies to get this done. So we recommend a committee be formed, people volunteer for it. And what we've learned in our experience is that we move quicker if people are assigned particular responsibilities and to make sure that those things happen rather than groupthink. And of course, it's brought back to the group. The cost, we looked at the cost for this, it should be 0, or maybe a modest sum for supplies and things. We think that the second task is to seek to build collaboration with neighboring communities with similar problems to engage in mutually beneficial efforts and resources. We don't think that'll have a cost. We propose a residential outreach program and educational program to promote collective and collaborative action as a community, with particular importance for green infrastructure changes. We've budgeted like $1,000 for that. We want to support, incentivize community green infrastructure improvements to stormwater management and reduce discharge onto other properties. We've thought of a budget of about $75,000 for that work. We also think that efforts should be done to find alternative resources for that money. But what we've learned, and what Megan Benea confirms, is that green infrastructure is great if it's done on individual properties, but it doesn't have quite the effect you want of reducing water discharge onto other lands, including public lands. We get a much better result if many residents install green infrastructure in their properties, sometimes in collaboration with their neighbors. And you get a better result. You get more water that's collected and managed and then discharged at a rate that can be absorbed. We propose drafting, enacting, and implementing a stormwater management plan and remediation ordinances. These would essentially require stormwater management plans for individual properties where, and we've settled on this applying when there's construction that will result in 400 square feet of land movement. But that number can be discussed. We think that the way this would work is that the builder or contractor or owner would, as part of the permitting process, if we're talking about 400 square feet of land, submit a stormwater plan that would show that there would be no increase in water runoff onto other people's property as a result of the construction, leaving it to them as to how they control that water. There's flow wells, dry wells, swales, rain gardens. There's lots of ways to do it, or even just general planting ideas. We think that it would probably make sense to consider increasing the permeable land and decreasing impermeable land. One of the things that would help there is to preserve trees that absorb the water and use it and in a way that reduces discharge. And we've thought about a budget of maybe $50,000 for the legal work or community planning work that would be required to draft the code and the plan. Lastly, we recommended 10 different gray infrastructure projects where there are flooding issues, and the engineer Balance has identified them, provided recommended gray infrastructure construction, and provided an estimate of the reduction in flooding that would produce, and looked at this from I believe it's a 30 or 50-year window. I can't remember. And the budget that the engineer provided for that was $3,486 and $3,486,070, which we understand would be sequenced and spent over time. And there are also ways to look for third-party money sources for that. So what we think is that we have built tremendous momentum over the last 2 years and 8 months, especially in the last several months or the last year. And we strongly recommend that actions be taken now to maintain that momentum and support. And we try to get away from or mitigate the impact of complying with the law in terms of establishing a committee and when to populate it and all that stuff. We've thought of some workaround ideas to do that. So our recommendation is that you all vote to establish a committee for the purposes that we've described here, and send out a request for volunteers now, understanding that some things won't happen until the new council takes office. However, some of us in the task force are still around or available and would be willing to help on an interim basis. All right. And it seems to me that we could get started on an authorization and outreach to the local towns and villages to get the mutual exploration of issues and possible collaboration started now. We think that you could vote to authorize the VMA community outreach and green infrastructure education process, which would enable residents to see and understand what they can do and start working on it. It may take years to do the gray infrastructure, but the green infrastructure would have an impact, especially if it's engaged in by many residents. And that would have an impact up front, and would also give us a feeling that we are owning our future and starting right away. So tonight is, unless you extend the time for some of the volunteers on the task force to do some of these interim tasks, it's our last night. We're done. We're looking forward to answering all of your questions about the things I've discussed. I'll take some of the questions. Yasmina will take the others. And so, and then, like I said, we'd like to get to the residents' questions at the end. So I asked the council, do you have some questions for us?
Okay, Mark, are you the only formal presenter, or are we done hearing from the committee now?
We are prepared to answer questions.
Okay, good. Okay, let me turn to my council members. First, I want to tell you how appreciative I am personally, and I think I see smiles from the rest of my council members here, of the work you've done, the work that the contractor has done in putting this together. I would like, when we finish with this discussion, I'm going to ask the council to approve a new committee and put out a media call for volunteers. We will then have to write up a mission statement for this committee to give them their marching orders, as we typically do. But as I agree that we don't want to have a big gap here from the end of your findings and your proposals to when we actually start doing or actually considering things. So we want to get going with that. So let me ask questions, comments.
I was just going to thank you, the entire task force, and I agree with what Arthur said, that the urgency of the weather patterns and the climate, the momentum that exists, needs to be responded to with this creation of a committee, that this is not a temporary task force, check the box with a report, and let's see what happens. So I agree that we need to keep the momentum going, and hopefully have a lot of volunteers that are going to be active and help us point us in the right direction. And then also, in terms of the budget, have the council discuss future budgets to actually fulfill this mission and make physical changes to this community that will benefit everyone. So thank you very much.
I'll remind you, we already have money in the budget for next year to build on some of these issues, to both educate and subsidize and put in some of the structures on private properties, like we do with trees right now. Alexa.
I think that your report and all of the effort that all of you have put in has also opened a door for this community to work more together towards a very specific outcome. And I appreciate that you are looking at this both on an individual basis as well as a fuller community basis and a future basis. So I think working immediately on your suggestions is paramount.
Susan.
In the interest of not having a gap in the work, maybe it would make sense just to extend the terms of the current members, since I think, Mark, you said members are willing to continue
on an interim basis.
And then we could just, by the time a mission statement is drafted and it's time to seek new volunteers anyway in July.
So we will continue with the committee.
Change the name of the task force to a committee.
And call for
new
volunteers. Anyone who wants. So we'll continue the committee as is. You don't have to leave if you don't want to. You can continue, but we will call for new volunteers.
Can I just one final comment? I apologize. Having witnessed now how long it has taken on the traffic study to sidewalk Brookville. I mean, the speed bumps can be done much faster. And of course, we were dealing with a state state
Yes.
road.
Yeah.
My worry is how long it will take from concept to follow through and actual, physical infrastructure being implemented because of all the bureaucratic hurdles. So that's why this
On
momentum is
on
important.
that point immediately, Michael, after we get the sidewalk in, put down a note for future work. Start working with WSSC in the county who run the sewers. How do we, if we want to do it, and this is all for future decisions, if we want to work on sewers, like we.
By
working
sewers,
on
you
the
mean
sidewalk.
storm drains, correct?
Yeah, storm drains.
Yeah.
How do we do it? There was a casual conversation years ago. I can't remember with what manager, it may have been Niles, who said, your WSSC said, we don't have any money to do anything. We know you're overloaded. If you want to do it, that's swell. And that was the extent of the conversation.
Seems like it's the same
Yeah,
response
this-
we constantly get.
Right, right.
Yeah.
But
And,
we
and
didn't start-
WSSC controls
ahead.
the potable water and the sewerage, but the county controls the storm drains.
That's
storm
right, but
system.
but they took over that function. And
The
I don't
county
know-
took over that function from WSSC in the
Yeah.
60s. Yes.
It was that long ago?
It's like a minute ago. It's
I
like
thought-
a blink of an eye.
Can I say something? Can I say
Yeah, go
something?
ahead.
Gene brought this up at the last meeting. See? And part of what the committee will have to do, and I forgot to put it in this thing, is go find out who's going to be responsible for what and where we can get Marty for what.
Thank
Okay.
you.
Yeah.
But I have one other point to make. This is my third task force. And I promised my wife not to be on another one. But
That's a committee.
I got her approval that I can be a laboring oar, but not a chair responsible for the whole thing. So just so somebody else will have to be the
Okay.
chair.
Okay.
There is an issue that has come up. When we look at your 6-point logical outline here, when for the new committee, one of the things to think about is cost benefits. How would you rank these things? What would you want to do first and why? If you were going to do one thing, what would it be? If you did one, do you have to do the second? If, for example, just pure example, if we had a very simple ordinance on a limit on impermeable surface,
Mhm.
you have to do anything else? Does that handle it? Or do you need something else? If you say, well, it'd be nice to have something else, that doesn't cut it. You have to come up with arguments, rationales, and the costs and benefits. So these are or if we were to adopt the counties, you have to do anything else. So these are some of the questions that the council will be asking of a future committee. Probably the once and future, as King Arthur was the once and future king, I think this committee is the once and future committee. So these are some of the things to be thinking of as we're moving forward.
And I see their hands up, and
Yeah.
I definitely want others to have their chance to speak further. But I do want to say that I'd like to share, I've put together a few slides on the financial scenarios and how we could jump in immediately within this actual fiscal year that we're, the budget that's been introduced, but then look at this in a sequence based upon what the task force has actually come up with. So why don't we go through the comments, and I'll need just, like maybe 5 minutes or so to go through that.
And council.
Not yet.
Okay. Okay, I see Jane's hand up. Let's turn quickly, Jane, and then we'll move on. Oh, and Elizabeth.
I'll try to be as quick as I can. I'm confused. Who owns the storm drains?
The
What you're
county.
saying to me is the county owns them, and that was always my understanding, which is one of the reasons why we have the debacles on Quincy Street, et cetera, et cetera. What are we doing paying for county responsibility for building out, maintaining, and do we have the authority to do that? Is it because the county's happy to allow us to fix it? But once we fix it, does it then become our problem? It's already our problem because the county won't fix it. But I'm thoroughly confused. We don't own it, but we've decided we need to fix it. Somebody
That is
explain this.
Jane, that's the story we've got from the county. But that was casual. It was years ago. This has to be looked at again.
Yeah, I think this
But
is
before we spend any money, I would think
Yeah.
we probably ought to know who's
Of course,
responsible for the storm drains.
That's true.
I think, Gene, this goes to what we dealt with Brookville as well. It's a state road, and we found out it was not a priority. It was not going to be touched for probably another 10 years or so, and so we had an understanding and probably even I don't know if we had a contract, but that we were able to do this. And so your question, I think, is really, really important, because it's not only if they agree, if we have an agreement with them that we can use our funds to improve and expand upon, what happens on the maintenance front. You know, are we on the hook for maintaining them as well?
Exactly.
That's a big issue, because the costs there could go way beyond what we expect.
Committee member Elizabeth.
Muted.
Yes.
There we go.
Okay. Good evening. I just wanted to add a couple of other complimentary comments to what Mark has presented. First, on the Montgomery County, the issue about the storm drains. I interviewed the Chevy Chase Village for some of the information that went into the report, and I recall the discussion was that yes, the county owns the drains, but they don't have money, so that they're happy if you provide the funds to do the job, but they must do the hookups and all of that. Okay, so they take responsibility for the joining of the various pipes. The issue of long-term maintenance, I'm not sure what the answer is, but they've been through it. And this is the second point I was going to say is we're not starting from scratch. All of the neighboring municipalities are somewhere along this trajectory already and have gained experience, pros and cons and best practices. And I would say part of the job of this committee is to interact, to not reinvent the wheel, and to take advantage of the experiences, because some of them are further along, much further along already in several of these areas, including ordinance development. Just a month ago, we got a copy of Chevy Chase Section 3 new tree canopy ordinance, for example, which was just hot off the press. So the other point was the experience that exists in the green architecture, green infrastructure on private property and outreach and education at the county level is very extensive. So there are all kinds of programs that are standing, that exist, that can be shared and presented locally. So we don't have to start from scratch on that either. So and then you also asked what would be your priorities. It just seems logical to me that we need the most urgent thing, if you're going to start address flooding issues, is to get your ordinances in place as quickly as possible. Now, and the permitting, right? The permitting, Chevy Chase Village, for example, has a lawyer that does nothing but review building permits for the village. So he's specialized in stormwater management issues, but it happens to be a lawyer. Another alternative is a water engineer. Somerset, I think their choice was to get a stormwater engineer to do that function. But those are things that can go, could start moving forward, addressing the problem of, at least that arises as a result of abuses in construction, let's say. And then the outreach things, like I said, they can be parallel, because a lot of those are things that we can just tap onto and don't have to create. So I just wanted to mention those few points for you.
Good, thank you. Thank you. Mark, is that a new hand up or an old one?
I forget. I'm getting old.
Okay, it's okay. Okay.
I think I was going to talk to you about with ordinances. I think
Oh,
I've drafted a summary of what I think the ordinance should do, and that is to take the county ordinance, make a couple changes in it for us. And the reason why I came to that, and Ron's going to have to decide this, is that the state law that I read seems to say that our stormwater management plan has to comply with state law and be reviewed by natural resources unless we I forgot the exact wording, but unless we basically work with the county and use the county ordinance and adopt it as our own. And it seemed to me that that's the route we want to run, although we don't want these waivers, or at least not the way they're done now. And we want it to cover smaller land. What's the word? I forgot the word. Disturbance. Yeah.
okay.
Because
So let me-
that's the name. So it seems to me that we may be able to get Ron to do all the work, but Ron, you're not laughing.
Yeah.
And so if my plan makes sense and it gets blessed, we could move on that really quickly. And what I like about that is to get ahead of the developers get ahead of their curve. And I agree with Elizabeth and I think Yasmina has some information about resources for green infrastructure stuff that I'd like you guys to hear about. I think we could get a lot of that moving, and as well as the community developing relationships with the other towns right away.
Good. Okay, Yasmina. Well, Yasmina, is that a real background in back of you or digital?
It's not today background, so it is
It's a
digital.
previous.
It's
Okay.
an aspirational. I'd like to go back to this background, but maybe we'll create it in our very own little community.
There you go.
So I have to say it's just been great working with this with this task force and with the council, because each one of us brings different strengths to the table, and just such an amazing group, and we've really appreciated Michael's support and the council's support on this work. But what I want to talk about is just reinforcing again to Arthur's question about what's our first priority is really all of these actions are interdependent upon one another. And that's the very reason for which we presented an action plan with 6 concurrent actions, because each one of them is mutually reinforcing one another. It's we're building a web of different actions across the community that are really going to make a difference. If we spend close to $4 million on gray infrastructure improvements without resolving the issues with new construction or with people draining water from their yards onto the right of way, we really won't have resolved issues across the community. So it's important that while we're doing this gray infrastructure work, while we're working with local communities to figure out how we approach the county for support and work with what they figured out with working with WSSC and other utilities, what works, what doesn't work, and look for funding, that we also implement solutions in people's backyards as well. So we have proposed some grease solutions. And this is really modeled on some experiences that some of our neighbors have had in other communities. Chevy Chase View specifically has looked at augmenting the county rainscape program, which is a great program where residents can get support to make their yards greener, to install rain gardens or conservation gardens that can capture the water. We know that a rainscape garden can impact the flow of water by mitigating about 30 to 40% of the water, right? So that's a lot less water that we're putting on the right of way, that we're putting on the street, that might be running into other people's property, or into, our storm water drains, or creating cracks in the sidewalks that we then have to go and repair, after the winter. So, I think there's a strong argument to be made for doing all of these things concurrently.
Good. Well, thank you.
Yasmina, don't forget rain barrels and flow wells and all that stuff to capture the water and discharge it slowly.
Thank you, Mark. And yeah, so we also suggested rain barrels. Rain barrels alone are not going to make a huge difference in managing the water in our community, but it's a great way for people to get engaged around stormwater management. And it's a great way to be utilizing the water that we're going to have. Keith just told us we're going to get a lot of rain in May. That's where you're going to see a lot of people noticing flooding in their backyards. Well, let's capture that water and use it to water our flowers in August when we typically have a drought. And it's just another great way for the community to get together and to appreciate one another and learn what's going on in each other's backyards, literally.
Right, literally. Okay, Jackie, do you have anything you want to add?
I mean, I do think that, just when when you're trying to manage an energy problem, you really start first with conservation. I think we do need to do as much as we can with the community work, but I think the ordinances, with the county offering waivers left and right, I think we have to be the backstop. And, it's a simple thing to just take the county ordinance, change the dimensions that we wanted to apply to a smaller range, and just say, we're serious now. As a developer, you can't go around these ordinances like you're used to. And I think that can make a huge difference.
Thank you. Marty, before going to you, let's go to your presentation, Jeff. As treasurer and keeper of our finances, Jeff has some outlined some financial issues here.
So I'll make this short and sweet. I do have a couple slides, and this is not a technical review of the proposal, meaning that the merits are already there, and good faith and trust in the magnificent task force, now soon to be committee, and just really appreciative of everything you've done. So I'm just going to layer this in terms of your recommendations, how you've created what I like to think of as buckets, and then apply that to our own financial standing, and then share that again with the community residents and our council members, so that we have a very clear path of action. And again, I'll do this relatively short and sweet. And let me just share this screen. Okay. Perfect. Now the question is, okay, can folks see the slides? Is that in proper view? All right, well, let's go with this. So just a couple main points. And again, Michael, I'll just share, you could put this like in the appendix, or just so folks have it, you don't have to write notes and things. But bottom line is looking at this as a strategy of a phased approach and it's financeable. So the first piece is the overall bucket. We already know roughly about $3.5 million. And the work is phased, intermediate, short-term, long-term. And there are some very specific near-term actions that we can proceed within the fiscal year 27 budget that's already been introduced. And we'll talk a little bit about whether or not we even need to take action if those buckets are already in that introduced budget. And if not, do we need to tweak? Because again, we have this interim period, and then the next council meeting would be when we would vote to adopt. And then this is the really getting now to the meat. This is suggestions. I could have presented a much more deeper sensitivity, but this is just sort of the initial approach that I would put out there. First and foremost, the idea is that we have over $6 million in reserves, and that the idea of taking the 1 million of those reserves that are already designated for infrastructure and other projects we can apply. So this doesn't even necessarily need a vote from us, but just putting in perspective, we already have set aside at least an envelope of $1 million that could be applied. Then we have this other 2.5 million that is part of this overall proposal. This is where it will get very interesting, and I'll go through very specifically. And then this other piece of it, the estimated, well, I'll get into this, but I go through a financing scenario where, because we are a municipality, we actually then have access to low interest loans through the state that would be roughly between a 1% and 2%. We'd have to research the current rates, that if we were to do something like that with a blended model, that actually the estimated annual cost of servicing that loan would be within the envelope of income excess that we have each year. And why is that important? Because by doing something like that, it does not put us into a tenuous financial position of saying we're going to do all 3.5 million from our reserves, because if we did that, it would also lower our annual income. Anyway, long story short, that is the scenario I'm going to present. And then this is the phased approach, okay? So this is where it will get important for us as a council. Is there anything we have to take action on, or is it already there? So this FY27 immediate actions, roughly we have an envelope of about $100,000 to $150,000. That includes the ordinance development and then some of the green infrastructure. There is an offset around permit fees, but that probably would not kick in until the following year. So just putting in perspective, that seems to be the immediate, whether or not that's reflected. Do we have to make any nuanced changes? And then now let's look at these gray buckets. The first, the immediate priority, is roughly about $800,000. That is where we can look at this very specifically again in this next fiscal year, and the possibility, depending upon how quickly we can implement and we get an RFP and other things out there, does that spill over into the following year? You know, so we would just look at this. But again, most importantly, we already have this set aside as a placeholder in a reserve. So whether or not, again, Arthur, the chair, council members, do we even have to vote on this now? I would say probably not, because it's already designated, but really just putting out that given the urgency and the way that the task force, as well as the engineers and their final report, we have the funds to jump in now on these immediate things, the immediate actions and the immediate bucket gray areas. Then the next piece I'll go through, the other priorities, the 1.18 million, and then the longer term, the 1.5 million. So roughly about 2.7 million. Again, those are going to be over this timing of about anywhere from a 2 to 5, maybe 5 to 10 years. And this is all, again, we're going to work this out. But what's so important about this is, again, this phased approach, and I'm going to get into with the next slide, why this is so important. So this is where it gets very interesting. And again, I'm not saying this is the approach, because some may say, well, let's do it all from the reserves. And this is where we'll have more discussion beyond, I think, the 1 million that we could apply right now without real much controversy. But we could look into the state financing piece of about 2.5 million. And again, these are just illustrative. We would get into the mechanics with the state and the qualifying for the loans, but a term rate of roughly around 20, 25 years. We could look at a rate, again, depending upon what the current rates are, between 1.5 and 2.5%. And again, the annual cost of maintaining that, you know, roughly between 120, 140,000. That is well at the moment within the income surplus that we have. And this way we would be able to retain our reserves, a sizable, where we are actually getting income from it. And again, we don't know. There is unpredictability of the future. This way we can keep that nest egg just in case something does come up. And again, so I think pretty much that's clear, but I believe that this is, it preserves the reserves and it gives us this flexibility. And then, you know, this kind of summarizes that, why it works. It's prudent. It aligns with the task force, all the magnificent work they've done, immediate progress jumping in with that first million. Again, we already talked about the reserves that we preserve. And again, I think it's so important. Let's take a deep breath, step back. We are not talking about raising taxes. We're not talking about assessments. You know, I mean, we are in such a privileged position that we are able to do this, and we have options of how we'd like to do it. And of course, Yasmina and the other members of the committee, Mark, we are addressing something mission critical. This is not a nice to have. And I want to put this out there. I put it in bold at the end. We are already paying for this problem today. We know this. I'm sure, you know, I look around, every one of us who owns a home has put something into this problem. And so, but right now it's at the individual level, and it's unpredictable, and it assumes the burden of our residents. And by doing this, we're doing it collectively. This is truly the best case scenario for a municipal project. So again, not to oversell it, but you know, it's sort of, let's go. And then that's the final thing I just put out there. This is not a question of if we can, it's really just a question of how and when. And with that, I turn it back over. Good. Thanks.
Thank you.
Can I just say, it is just so disappointing that we can't rely on the county for short-term purposes. And that's, we saw this with the snowstorm, the Snowcrete, how lucky we are that we have local government here versus what Rolling would dealt with.
Sidewalks.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, but it's disappointing that we will have to use our funds in order to make this happen, but I'm grateful that we have them and that we can do so.
May I just add very quick, sorry, I took up already a lot of real estate on this, but I think also when folks talk about selfishly or personally property value, I mean, this is a really significant piece. It will affect perhaps insurance, individual homeowners insurance, the idea that we can put this in there, but also there's the property value, again, of dealing with this and folks wanting to come in this community because we've dealt with it.
Yeah.
Okay, Marty, okay, Mark, another last.
Yeah, I'd like to sort of like tie this all together, if that's possible. It seems to me that the idea of going back to the county, that we're talking about going back to the county and seeing we can get some money from them for the gray infrastructure. Green infrastructure is a different conversation. Seems to one of the things I heard somewhere was that if we could get some of our local village and towns to come together on these issues, we might have more success in getting the county to pay attention to them. So it seems to me that we talked about, this is another reason why the liaison work is a good top priority. And then I think that the same thing is with working on the liaison within our community for green infrastructure, because I know that Yasmin has identified some ways of moving forward and maybe even ways of looking for resources. And so those two things I think are and the ordinances are probably the three priorities. It looks like the committee's already been formed. We're just not calling it that.
Okay.
But I just want to close on that. Are we confirmed that we're creating a committee, but the task force is going to do it until the committee is formally created and populated?
Your task force has come to an end. We will be voting on a committee tonight.
Oh, okay.
So the committee tonight would run through the rest of FY 26, and then the council can make a recommendation to next year's council.
We can establish a committee right now.
Right. Well, next year's council will have to appoint that one.
No, we can appoint it right now.
Well, no, for the individual members of the committee, the next council will have to make those appointments. Yeah.
We can appoint a committee right now that lasts to the end of the fiscal year.
Exactly.
Yes.
Yes.
So
To the end
two
of the
parts.
fiscal year,
Well,
yes.
no, I don't think there is a fiscal year limit on a committee.
Well, it depends if it's not a statutory ethics or ethics committee is the only one that's a 2-year committee. Otherwise, they're one.
Ron, we just appoint a committee and they run until we say they don't?
Yes, I think so. I'm looking at your code right now to see if there are any limits. But yeah, you can appoint a ad hoc committee. Of course, a future council could disband it.
Yeah, Right.
Yeah, I think
There
that's
you
where
go.
the
And everyone will need to be sworn in again as of July
Yeah.
1st.
Yeah.
So
Right.
I mean, by the way, it's semantics. We
Yeah.
could also just extend the life of this task force till the end of this fiscal year, you know.
Yeah, I would like to start off with a new committee,
Yeah.
get going. If some future council wants to can them, let them do so.
One-term council members.
Should we, is there any question here to, that we have the committee, the task force members, I presume they're okay with this, except I know that Mark mentioned, rightfully so, that his tenure as chair may be limited. So the only question is everyone comfortable with this sudden conversion? Any issues with that?
The thing is, the reason I would like to have a new one is that the tasks are changing. We have a mission statement for them. They've accomplished the mission.
Right.
Now we have a new set of
And
tasks.
while there can be a transition, there still has to be a call for volunteers because
Right.
others within the community might want to
Well,
join this.
that's right.
committee.
My son to join. But you had your hand up.
Well, I wanted to get back to Jeff's proposal about how to finance this. So if Martin's Additions took out a loan, then all the money would be there up front. Why wouldn't you do all of the entire construction program and get economies of scale?
Okay, great question. Let me address it first. Two points. Let me also mention that this, and again, we have to get into the mechanics, but that actually envelope of the loan is like a home equity loan. So what it is you're not paying interest up front just because you get that envelope. It's as you spend as you go, you pay as you go, which is great.
Okay.
The other piece of it is, again, there was not a technical analysis per se, but based upon what you have in there, short, intermediate, and longer term, it's just the idea that not everything necessarily needs to be done up front. It's that sequencing and timing. I just used what was in the report, but there may be more semantics of what needs to be considered. But
I think
again,
part of it was too thinking about, okay, if we had to prioritize how we would do it, but all of these areas currently have pretty significant flooding.
Yep.
So there might be some rationale.
Yeah, when we talk of this big infrastructure, that's all the one storm sewer line that starts down at it from Quincy, comes up through Bradley, up through Raymond, and then out. That's what we're talking about?
Well, that's the near term one, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I want to say, sorry, I meant to mention this. I know it was on a slide, but this does not include my analysis that we have any grant money coming in. And I know members of the committee have spoken to folks. And so there is a possibility that and that would just add.
Yeah, and then we could pay down the debt.
Yeah.
I mean, I think these grants take so long that we should go ahead and do a loan.
Right.
And then hopefully, and I don't think in this current administration, there's going to be any grant money. But we might get a new administration with some grant money.
Well,
Gives me, could I just speak to this point? And sorry, because I realize that Marty has had her hand up for a while. But I just wanted to add that Bayland has identified that at least for one project, which is the stream running at the end of Dead End Delfield. Which is more of a green infrastructure improvement than a gray infrastructure improvement, because we're talking about stream restoration here and mitigation, trying to stop it from expanding. That has been identified as a really good candidate to apply for a grant from the Chesapeake Trust. And I know from speaking to a local organization here that's very well respected that they would be interested in mentoring us as a potential grantee applicant. So I think that, there are opportunities. And I think that, we need to give ourselves a little bit of time, obviously, to do that, which speaks well to this kind of prioritization of immediate, medium-term, long-term priorities, which will give us time to do these applications.
Thank you. And Elizabeth.
This goes back to that last comment that Mark made about, Megan mentioned this, that most of our stormwater problems don't start in Martin's Additions. They start across Brookville Road in Chevy Chase Village. And the water is just running across the street and down the hill because we're downhill from all of that side of Chevy Chase. So her suggestion was that in terms of fundraising, that you might have, this is where you might have greater impact and success in attracting additional funds if you could go in collaboration with some of those sections on the other side of Brookville to solve a mutual problem, you know, that they already have, I'm sure, and that it's just being shared with us. So if you look in her report, she goes into detail. I mean, there's a couple of images in there where it shows, you can see the red patches that are outside of Martin's Additions coming into. So I think that's another very valid area of investigation for complementary funding as well on whichever of those projects would be best suited for that.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Marty, your observations.
Thank you. I could not be more thrilled with the report. I've looked at government reports for more than 40 years. This is one of the best in 11 pages that I have ever seen. I want to commend the task force and Michael and everybody. Balin did a great job. I actually read the 100-pager. And you guys, you know, my mother-in-law used to say there's no substitute for brains. And boy, does this report reflect that. It's one of the smartest, most practical plans I have ever seen as a government economist in my entire career. And I agree that we should start immediately on the ordinance development and with community input. Again, one of the things I like about the whole process here is that you have invited the community in to your development of this. And that is something, you know, I really champion transparency, and I've seen it modeled the way it should be done with this whole process. I want to thank the council for continuing this as a committee. I think it's one of the most important things that we'll do in Martin's Additions in my lifetime. Right up there with the sidewalk project on Brookville Road. This is huge. And I want to say thank you to everyone involved. Jeff Lander, I want to thank you for the financial analysis. I was thinking along the same lines as an economist. It's very doable. We are very, very fortunate that we have resources. And I want to pick up on the point that Yasmina and Elizabeth just made about this is a joint project. We are much more likely to succeed with grants or state or county funding if we do it with Section 3, Section 5, all the places our water comes from. So, and I love the community aspect of it where you have community people involved. I can see after the May rains, you know, people are going to be lining up, right? You know, who can I get to help me dig a rain garden in my front yard? How can I contribute? And I'm excited about it. I think we could even do a thing where we have kids painting rain barrels in July, you know, and get the kids involved here. We have a scout troop here that's always looking for stuff. I think you get the kids involved, boom, you got the parents. And so there is so much positive here to be done and so much that can be done, you know, pretty darn quickly that I am just thrilled beyond words. And again, I thank you for your brains, your dedication, your diligence, and just the sheer intelligence and clarity of this plan. Bravissimo, and I bring 40 years of gratitude, and I know it's going to happen in the next 4 years, not 40. We're going to make this happen. Thank you, Mark, for chairing the committee. Thank you, everybody on the task force. Yasmina, I love the flowers behind you. I can't wait to see those in your yard here in Martin's Additions. I'm going to sign off with just a huge thank you as a community member who just thinks this is terrific work. And God, I love competent people. Thank you.
Okay, well, don't go away because the committee reports are up next.
Yeah.
Okay.
Real quickly, I just going back to piggybacking what Yasmina said on the grants, and Marty obviously mentioned that too. I think we need to look at all of the above strategy because, among other things, a lot of municipalities who have lobbied up, they go to their members of Congress. So federal dollars for community directed spending or community project funding. This is, you know, we kind of missed the boat for this next fiscal year, but, you know, why use all of our funds if we can look at all these other pots and buckets? So it's something where, you know, I'm happy to go to Jamie Raskin's office and have this initial conversation. If we collaborate with all the other municipalities, of course, again, strength in numbers in having these conversations, but we should look at all the options.
And if a large deluge of water is crossing a state
Yes,
road,
at the
that
same
also-
time.
yeah.
Right.
Timing is all.
Arthur, I do apologize. This is a very quick soundbite. I said I would mention this. So our neighbor on Turner, Robert Bean, mentioned he's actually participated in the rain garden program, and he offered as a volunteer that as you stand this up, that he would be delighted to work with any residents that might decide to take this up because he's gone through the process.
Okay. Okay. So with that,
What's his name?
Rob Bean.
Rob Bean, thanks.
With that, I will move to create a new stormwater committee with the mission of advising the council on the stormwater improvement action plan and any other things we think of in the future. So I move to, do we have a second to do that? And do we have a vote? So we have a new committee going forward. We will put the word out for volunteers. Hope you all volunteer. We have the experience here. And as we have a number of us that said, we don't want to let this drag and fall into some kind of a slump. So 5 years from now, we're saying, where did the time go? And as time becomes available, we have to start working with the county to see how this might go.
Procedurally speaking, can the existing task force can they transition into this committee while we ask for volunteers?
Yeah,
seamless.
If you volunteer, raise your hand. Okay, we have several hands raised.
Okay, awesome, thank you.
And Arthur, just as we don't need to do this now, but administratively, between now and the next council meeting, we could take a look at that budget that's been introduced and see of those very immediate projects. I think around roughly 150,000, for the green and some other and the code review. Is that there in place, or do we have to redo something?
I took the number that I put into the budget that got introduced from Yasmina's green infrastructure program.
Right.
So we can review that again to see if they've added additional things since then.
So it's administrative. We don't have to do
That's
anything.
there.
Okay,
Yep.
Perfect.
Okay, Jeff, you're on again. Treasury report.
Well, I will make this short and sweet. And thank you. So just, as we had that discussion on the financing of the report from the task force, the task force. So again, we are in very good standing, as you could see from the financial report for this month. And putting that in perspective, we are about $200,000 ahead of our projected total income for the year. Of course, we still have roughly about a little under $70,000 that's coming in from the ARPA funds, so those sweeteners, and then again that interest income that comes in from our reserve. So that's why it's a delicate balance of how much reserve you want to take versus keep to maintain that income. But again, we're in good shape, and we still expect a fairly large chunk because of the tax season. The filing date was just this past week, that we're going to get another big tranche. So we're going to expect even more of a bump from where we are by the end of the fiscal year. So with that said, I'll turn it over and let's keep on going.
Thank you. Good treasury report as usual. Okay, committee reports. We see Marty, Water Committee has done their job for the night. Marty, Election Committee.
Hi there, thank you. I think it's page 17 of the packet has our one-page report. We have 5 candidates running this year. The new Nudge a Neighbor campaign really increased civic participation. We had more than 20 people who were calling around, nudging their neighbors to run. And the new flyer, What Does a Village Council Member Do, also seems to have been helpful. Everything's right on track. It's been a wonderful team on the election committee. Moving to the voter roll, the second paragraph in the report there, we have 641 qualified voters, and the voter roll contractor, Mr. Logan Rayburn, really did an excellent job. Very, very thorough. You can see the description of all the different pieces there. It took about 56 hours to do it this year, but it was extremely thorough. And we supervised the work, met all the legal requirements and the regulations. And to date, no one has appealed any of the committee's decisions. We had the voter roll to the mail vote contractor on time, actually a day early. And, everything's rocking and rolling. The ballots are now corrected. Again, the committee had to spend some time making sure that Electric actually followed the instructions to make the corrections, but they've now done that. The ballots are scheduled to be mailed on Wednesday, April 22, the day after the forum, and they look good. I should mention that the county list of registered voters is still incredibly inaccurate. About 200 people listed as residents of Martin's Additions who are not residents of Martin's Additions. But again, kudos to the contractor, Logan Rayburn, for the very thorough, systematic job he did. Forum is going to be next Tuesday, 7:30 p.m. All the candidates have confirmed they plan to be there to participate. We are encouraging residents to send in questions for the forum. We've got some interesting ones so far. We look forward to receiving more. So any residents listening to this, you have until noon on April 21st to send the election committee any questions that you'd like us to ask the candidates at the forum. And again, Michael has confirmed that he plans to record the forum. We will post it on the election page of the website. Election day is still May 5th. I went to the Community Engagement Committee. Thank you to Keith Allen and the entire Engagement Committee for the Election Day celebration on the sidewalk. And I know Michael and Aaron on the staff will be working a lot on that too. Looks like it'll be really good this year. We'll have the required drop box from Electric. They promised that. And we will supervise it as usual for the secure chain of custody on the ballots. We'll continue to do all the announcements and articles, and thank you to the staff for posting them. And we'll be glad to answer any questions that anybody might have tonight about the election process. So far, it's on track and looking good.
Okay, I see no questions, so
Thank you.
thank you.
You're
And
welcome.
I don't see.
I
any
can
oth-
speak for the CEC.
Okay.
The celebration on the sidewalk planning is coming together, and we hope you all enjoyed the pizza truck we had out here today. We will have a taco truck for the May 14th
Wow.
meeting, as well as barbecue for the June council meeting. So
Great.
come and enjoy this. We're putting out a call for resident artists tomorrow in the wrap up for the celebration on the sidewalk for if anyone wants to table. We have the list of our artists that have come out in prior years, so we'll of course be reaching out to separately, but we want to also put it out on a call for anyone else. So if you know of anyone that's would be interested in that, absolutely submit that. We're just asking people to submit that interest form by the 24th, which is a week notice. So
Good.
have them submit.
Thank you.
And could this include local authors who want to put out a stack of children's books for
I would be lucky.
Yeah, as long as
If
you're
they're not running?
yeah, I don't know about
It
electioneering.
seems like that
Well,
might
we'll have
be
to
a
think about the
little-
electioneering zone.
However, if I don't show up and I give it to someone else.
Yeah.
How about books on the Japanese economy?
I do think
1967
I'm
or
running.
more recent?
More recent, but not that
Not-
much.
You'll have to put up a what is it, a likeness of yourself in front of.
Right.
I will say it does include authors. We have had authors before and probably will again. So.
Okay, next item up is a draft ordinance on accessory dwelling units that has been required by changes in state law. Ron, again, you might want to explain how the state changed this law and how we have to become consistent with that.
Sure. So not this session, but last session, 2025, the State General Assembly passed a law promoting accessory dwelling units and gave local governments until October of 2026 to implement that law. And that law provides that accessory dwelling units need to be given the same rear and side setbacks as other accessory buildings like detached garages and sheds. So basically, local governments cannot have stricter rear and side setbacks for accessory dwelling units than detached garages and sheds. And if you do, you have to amend your code to address that. So Martin's Addition does have stricter setbacks for accessory dwelling units. So we have to revisit that and decide how we're going to amend the code to comply with the new state law. And I've come up with at least three options. So one, you could just increase the setbacks for all accessory buildings and then entertain variances for modest structures like sheds. However, that might create a lot of burden. The second option would be just to delete the stricter setbacks and allow accessory dwelling units to have the same setbacks as sheds and detached garages. And then the third option, which I've done in this draft for your consideration, is the same as two. Apply a 5-foot rear and side setback for all accessory buildings, but then have a special provision that provides if the building is taller than 15 feet or longer than 24 feet, then the setback increases regardless of how the building is used. Other jurisdictions currently do that and have done that for years, including Montgomery County. and town of Chevy Chase, for example. So that is the proposal, and we have time, but not a lot of time. We have to have it in effect by October, and you have to introduce at one meeting, have a hearing at a second meeting, and then the law takes effect, in the third month after. So, counting back, I think we do want to try and finish before the summer break.
We could introduce it tonight. We cannot pass it at the next meeting because there's not enough time. And then we would pass it in June.
Yes, correct.
Right. Okay. So I move to introduce ordinance number 2026-2, an ordinance to amend the code of ordinances to amend the building requirements applicable to accessory dwelling units. I think I said that right.
Yeah.
Yes. And Arthur, before the vote on that motion to introduce, I need to mention one other thing. There is a potentially sticky wicket. So that's the state law also says you can't impose on-site parking spaces for ADUs unless they're supported by a parking study. So right now, the village code says an ADU needs at least 2 dedicated on-site parking spaces. And so if we wanted to keep that requirement, we would need to support it with a parking study. So that a parking study would need to be commissioned and would need to reflect that that's a reasonable requirement based on limitations of parking on the street, etc.
Or we could take out the parking.
Correct. Yes.
So we could.
You don't have to decide that now.
Right. That's what I was going to say. We can introduce this now and then separately consider the parking spaces.
Yes.
Right.
Potential study.
Yeah.
I think Yasmina has a hand, and then I just had a comment or a question for Ron.
Wait a minute. Any other councilman? Yasmina, is this addressing this question? Or is that could be a note hand? What? You there?
Yeah, I mean, this is, I'm sorry, because I was so focused on stormwater, I didn't look at this proposal closely, but I do appreciate anything the council does to give residents time to look at this, especially as a resident living right next to an ADU with a shared driveway and parking issue. So
okay.
I just request for time.
Okay, you'll have 2 months.
Okay.
Yeah. So
be prepared. One moment, Karen. But Yasmin, be prepared to take a look at it and comment on it when it's considered. Okay.
100%. Thank you, Arthur.
Okay.
So I
Karen
don't.
Lager?
Yeah, I don't. I'm sorry, I can't show you my face. I don't know how to whatever.
Okay, we can hear you.
I don't know if it's appropriate for residents at this point to even say anything. Is it?
Go ahead.
So I'm on this call. Well, it's interesting to hear all that you do, by the way, and you do a lot. I had no idea. So thank you all for doing all the hard work that you do. I'm here because I want to hear about the variance stuff, the conversation that's going to happen. And as Yasmina just said, what you're suggesting and talking about, I understand you need to talk about this because of what's happening at the county level. This is a huge, huge issue. And I think it needs to be brought to everyone's attention in a way that they understand that there are potentially 3 options. There's probably many more, but this is real. If you're talking about someone being able to build something closer than what our current setbacks are, that's a big, big deal.
Right.
And I plead with you to please make sure people understand that this is something that's going to be discussed and voted on. And I also plead that you please listen to what residents say and don't just push this through.
Karen, I don't understand. You haven't really expressed your concern. What's your primary concern?
So my primary concern is, and I will say I'm not educated on this, but what I heard Ron just described was that someone can now build an accessory dwelling. And I don't even know exactly what the definition of that is, but it's up to 12 feet, I understand. And that it can be that the setbacks aren't become null and void that we currently have.
Not quite. They're the same setbacks that we have for other structures. So somebody could have a garage, a shed, and this would say an accessory dwelling unit would have the same setbacks as these other structures.
Is that, Ron, is that what you just said?
Yes. So, and to put it into real numbers, right now the village code says if you build an accessory dwelling unit, which maybe you've heard referred to as a granny pod, have you seen that these smaller looking homes in rear yards? There's none that I'm aware of in Maryland, but in the District of Columbia, sometimes there are storage containers that are converted into houses. There's also, mini looking homes. And then there's also apartments that are inside detached garages. What the village code currently provides is if you have a dwelling unit in an accessory building, like a detached garage or like a freestanding granny pod, it must comply with the same setbacks as the main dwelling. So 20 feet from the rear, 8 feet from the side.
Right.
But if you have a shed can be 5 from the side and 5 from the rear. And what the state General Assembly has done is said municipalities are not allowed to do that. You can't have stricter setbacks for accessory dwelling units. All accessory buildings need to be treated the same way, basically. So we can't say an ADU has to have a 20-foot rear setback, but a shed can have 5 feet. They both have to have the same setback. They both can be 20, or they both can be 5. And then, the middle ground. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Karen.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
I was going to say that, the middle approach, which I think is a good one, that's already being used and being used for decades by the county and other jurisdictions is to say the default setback is, let's say, 5 feet. But the bigger the building gets, the greater the setback needs to be in order to prevent the looming of that structure on neighbors and to lessen the impact on sight lines, etc. So regardless of what's happening inside the building, whether there's lawnmower or whether there's a dwelling unit, we don't care what's happening inside, but the bigger the building gets, the bigger the setback would be. That's the proposal in my draft, but it's just a draft for discussion. Nothing's been decided yet, obviously.
So what we have here is that all structures are being treated the same, but a looming structure, a big one, whether it's a garage, a shed, or an ADU, the bigger it is, the greater the setback has to be.
Correct.
Okay.
I just want to, I appreciate all this, and I was going to have a question, but really it's going to be perhaps a little bit more of a statement. And look, coming into this council meeting, I had specifically asked that the change in the agenda was from introduction to discussion. Because Karen, I am aligned with you very much that I think over the years that I've been on the council, it's really important that we provide something that is like a cover that informs residents why this is important, and so that it's plain speak. And again, I know we've been busy, but that's not included here. So it's just right now, it's straight up the draft. And I agree. I think people, would like to be informed. And I personally, I want to know the timeline, just because we're in April, May, and June. I guess that is this current council. So if perhaps other council members disagree and they feel that they want to vote to introduce, but again, just going over all the years I've been here, we've established, because every time we've done this, it creates unnecessary tire pressure within the community of introducing something that folks don't really have a lot of information about. and to introduce something that is just a draft of an ordinance without a cover to really plain speak why this is important, why this is in here, that just goes against the principle. So let me ask this just plainly. If we don't vote to introduce this today, are we then in jeopardy of not being able to pass this by the end of like, could we introduce it in May, provide the upfront cover in our next packet, and then maybe a little bit of understanding of why this, what's in here? Are there any options that we have to discuss as a council before voting on it? I just feel that we need a little bit more information here than here is a draft of legal language and we're introducing it. It just creates, I think, undue stress on the community, because there's going to be a lot of people who want to know what this is, and there's really nothing that tells folks what this is and why we're doing it. That's my opinion, folks. This does not have to get into a big debate. I'm just saying that is why I had turned it into discussion, and that we know that if we wanted to introduce it at the next session, we could, and we could pass it in June. But this gives now us an opportunity. We have members here we heard from Karen. I'm sure there are others who would really love to know and have an understanding of what this is in plain speak, and then we can introduce it, and we're not going to be jeopardizing our timeline in any way.
I'm sorry, that seems like a distinction without a difference. Waiting to introduce it and really discussing it now, or introducing it and getting all of the explication out.
And we can agree to disagree, but I believe the idea of introducing something always creates a lot of pressure on our community in an undue way. This way we have a discussion. We can post information in our next packet so folks have a full understanding of what this is. And then the next meeting we can introduce. And again, I was very clear that this will not jeopardize our ability to pass it in June. So, but we can agree to disagree.
Maybe we can.
Can I just ask, let's just have an answer from Ron. If we don't introduce it, can we still manage to address this and pass it before the end of the fiscal year?
Yes, I can answer that.
Yeah.
Are there 30 days between your May and June meetings?
Yes, May 14th is our next council meeting, and the next one is June 18th. So we have more than 30 days between those two meetings. It does not matter whether we introduce it tonight or we introduce it in 3 weeks.
Yeah.
But either way, there is going to be a public hearing before we adopt any piece of legislation. There's a public hearing, and that's the opportunity in June is going to be when there's a big announcement. We can put a cover letter on it. All of that would happen in June either way.
I think there's a lot of like semantics at play. I think what Jeff is saying, we've had these incidences where an introduction was so feared, even though the introduction really just meant let's start the conversation and the discussion.
Right, exactly.
I would want to err on the side of caution if we feel that this community is taken aback by an introduction of a draft they had never seen, which is just a way for us to say, let's start this conversation and the discussion with the community. I'm happy to hold off. I don't, sitting here at this table, I'm not as worried about it as maybe when I was just a mere mortal resident. But I mean, if we're worried about it and there isn't a timing issue and concern, I'm agnostic. I really am.
The one reason I had for introducing it now is to give 2 months to discuss it.
Yeah.
So we'll have 2 months.
We can do that even without an introduction. We can put it in a wrap up. We can start, we can start sharing it as a draft and then wrap up.
Ron, could we get like a one page or less description of what you just described to us?
Yeah, like an executive summary of the issue. And then with the draft, we can say the council has begun the conversation about something that is required of us.
Yes.
And here's a proposed draft. And this is what it's all about.
Yes.
And then we're going to have to introduce it at the next council meeting for discussion, and there will be a hearing at the following council meeting before we vote on it. I think that takes away any angst within the community and concern that Jeff has expressed.
Okay.
And if there's any, and I appreciate this, I appreciate everyone's, and Karen also, I appreciate very much your comments. But Ron, also in that, if there's anything for us that we need to decide on, or is there anything that as a council we need to take up as questions specific to this? Or is it more or less, this is it, and there really is no further discussion we need? I just, what is the decision making here other than a yes, no? Are there things that we have to think of? And that's just, I'm turning that over, not necessarily today, but just as part of this process.
Yeah, it's two questions. One, what should the setbacks be? And that's where you consider the three options I've provided or others. And then the second question is, do you keep the parking restriction or just delete it in the interest of simplicity and avoiding that parking study?
Right. As I recall, the parking restriction was put in as a way to deter ADUs. Is that, am I right about that, or what was the?
I wouldn't phrase it that way. I think it was put in to address the legitimate parking shortage.
Right. The parking shortage was really
Okay.
the motivator.
Okay, so we will defer this till the next meeting. Okay, moving on. We have the last month's council meeting minutes that have been distributed to the council for review. Any comments? We had some amendments suggested, so we have the meeting.
You have the updated minutes in there.
Anyone want
including
to?
Jeff's attachment that he shared last time during that meeting.
Move that we pass or
Adopt. Okay,
Second
adopt, approve the minutes. Okay, I second that. Aye. Good. Moving on. Manager's report.
Okay. It's 9:22. And my one-page report is on page 26 of your packet. We had a really fantastic Arbor Day event at the park. Thank you, Paula and Anna, for giving us a forest sound bath. That was lovely. I think we had maybe 12 or 13 people there. That was a really great event. We had the Timber Pizza here today. That was a fun new idea, and I thought it was a huge success. There was a line out there the entire time. They sold out of food. We will be making sure they have plenty of tacos next month. So
Can I have one suggestion?
Sure.
How about anyone who decides to attend the council meeting gets free food? I thought that could be an incentive.
Yeah.
That's all.
That's brutal.
Okay.
Yeah.
This food is for
We used to have sandwiches and stuff back in the old
More
times.
people came.
And more people came.
I got their sandwiches and left.
Just checking.
No, they didn't.
No, sometimes they stayed.
Well, I'm going to keep this moving here. We broke ground on the Brookville sidewalk this week. And
Amazing.
and we even poured concrete today. So the first little section of concrete is there. It looks great. As Arthur said earlier, concrete is beautiful.
Now, I wouldn't point fingers at anyone, but did we happen to see any handprints that made?
Not yet.
No, initials AA was here.
No, in fact, I said, how long does it take to harden? I said, when the kids get off the school bus, as we've had in the past, up comes the dirty words.
Of course.
Sure. You're going to get 12-year-old boys and they're going to see wet concrete.
We will, at the very end of this event, we will host a ribbon cutting, and I've asked them to save one square of concrete where at least the council member can put a handprint in there or something like that, and Arthur can save his love letter for his wife at that point.
Sweet.
We've only received a couple small issues that have all been resolved already. We moved a ramp over a couple feet just to avoid some roots. We found a sprinkler by one of the ramps that we were not previously aware of. So we have hired an engineer, a sprinkler company to come in and remove that. But nothing that's causing delays or any sort of major issues. So
As the contractor said, I was talking to him, he says, you never go 10 feet without finding something. He says, but we do. He said, we find it, we fix it.
Yeah, I can't wait till we move further north so that the closed sidewalk has an option to, for folks to move to.
Block 5 in some ways actually is the hardest there. and block 4, the next block is probably the second hardest because it gets really narrow and tight there, and there's an embankment. After that, we think it's going to be pretty much smooth sailing, but of course, things are going to come up every block. So yeah. The resident directory, you should have received it in the mail. If you didn't, I can give you one. We have on all of my projects, I do a precursor to a planning session for every project, the actual implementation of the project, which was completed as of the mailing of this, and then an evaluation. So we've done an evaluation on this project and found some successes that I want to repeat for next year. One, the annual reprint just makes sense. It's really not that expensive. If we're keeping up on top of the data every year, it's pretty easy to just go to reprint. And then some room for improvement next year. There was a couple mistakes here. One, we kind of prematurely switched to using people's cell phone numbers. So in my resident office list, I have 2 phone numbers for most residents. And because of we try to roll out the texting tool, I have kind of been actually more focused on getting people's cell phone numbers and confirming people's cell phone numbers. So I thought, well, that's probably the more accurate number. One, we really should go to one number that's people's preferred number and just use that, and then just mark whether it's a cell phone or a landline for texting purposes.
Okay.
So that's a pretty easy solution, and we can figure out which number people prefer. So that's a project to improve this process. And then the last thing was, there was one person that had previously requested to be removed from our list that we did not successfully remove from the list. So that person was printed in here. They wanted me to mention that without mentioning their name. So we have implemented a double check for next year on this process, on this SOP. And we're also, for all new residents, we're asking them to opt in to sharing their information. We're not just assuming your information is shared. You opt in to be on our list to start with. So that's point 4 there. Point 5, I have hired our special management consultant, Wayne Dawkins. He has helped me write and post 2 RFPs. One is for our waste recycling and yard waste collections, our waste management contract. I have scheduled a meeting with our sales rep from Waste Management, our current company. That is posted on the Maryland website as well as on our website. So you can find that and take a look at it. It's very similar to the one we posted a number of years ago for last time contract. The other RFP we have posted so far is the arborist. This is one that's up, and we're just moving forward on a case-by-case need basis with them. But we are reposting that. And I have actually today I met with the managers of 10 other municipalities in Montgomery County, and I asked them, who's your arborist contractor? Let me get your information. I will do a thorough research and be proactive in reaching out to all these different companies. I will do that for the trash companies as well, reaching out to all the different companies that these other people are using, just to see if there's anything that we don't know, or if anyone does something better or cheaper. We're always interested in that information. But of course, we're hoping that the companies we're currently working with bid again. We have good relationships with them, so hopefully that can continue. The one change that I've made on the arborist contract is I have just removed the piece about the tree planting program from that contract. And that is because Mulherron Tree Experts doesn't actually do that service. They, at a very, very high price, subcontracted out to a separate contractor who comes in and just plants the trees in bulk and does a pretty poor job. We've gotten a number of complaints about new trees dying from the strategies that they use to plant trees. We have found that they keep the burlaps on sometimes. We have found that they bury them too low into the ground and actually bury the trunks of the trees. This is called volcanoing instead of a donut. There should be a donut around a tree, around the root flare of the tree, not a pyramid-looking mulch volcano around the trunks of the tree. So removing that actually allows us to go directly through nurseries, and they have planting programs, and all of the other towns use specific nurseries. So I have that information, and we can just contract with them directly.
The other thing is that they were expensive.
they're so expensive. The nurseries that people are going directly to are planting the same quality of trees that we're getting for about $500.
We're paying $1,800
sometimes for some of the nice big trees that we get. So that's potential significant savings.
And we could even expand the program with that savings.
And when we have been planting every tree that someone requests, 1 tree a year per person. And the complaints we've gotten about the program is that some of them have died. I think Alexis' neighbor is on his 3rd tree in the same spot.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. But that sounds like
and the new tree that we planted directly next to you, Susan, that came down, that one died as well. So they did actually have that one insured, so they were able to replace it. Or it's being replaced. But so that's the one change in that contract. We will just add on a separate contract to get the tree planting program done. The tree planting program is not going anywhere. We will still get the same quality of trees. It'll just be a different person.
Okay.
Good.
Moving on. Oh, there is one other RFP or call that I'm going to post, and that is for the building permit administrator. I do have a meeting set up with one individual that provides the services for a number of towns. So I'm having that precursor meeting, but I'll still post a large call. The other thing I have found is that there's actually 2 other municipalities in the area that are looking for a company to do this exact same thing, that do not currently have a building permit administrator. So there's potentially an opportunity there to join forces and maybe hire a full-time person or get a company to come in that can work for all 3 of us at the same time. So that's just something we can look into. I'm setting up a meeting with those managers to kind of discuss that. We are planning the celebration on the sidewalk. I mentioned it earlier. The call for volunteers will go out tomorrow, and people will have a week to respond to that. And we are also inviting the vendors and the special guests, and Aaron is kind of taking the lead on managing our events side of things, getting all the vendors lined up for the food trucks and the celebration on the sidewalk and the 4th of July party that's happening in June. We are transitioning our building permit administrator role. I just mentioned that. And the next council meeting will be on May 14th. I just want to remind everyone it's a week early because you'll hear a lot about that. May 14th is my birthday, so you will never forget.
This year's May 14th is your birthday.
In June, we will need to pass a budget amendment. There's only, I think, 1 or 2 categories so far that we have slightly gone over. That I think the council's been previously aware of those slight things that need to be adjusted. So Jeff, me and you will get together and talk about this, but that's just a simple resolution that the council just needs to pass before the end of the year, just to move some money around. We didn't go over the entire budget. We just went over specific categories like snow shoveling. And I mentioned that, and the other things we'll do before the end of the year, there's all these projects. I just want to make sure they're all listed. And I sent the council about a week ago a big spreadsheet of all my project management. I think there's like 20 projects that are kind of currently moving. And like I said, there's a before, a middle, and an after of each of those projects. So the other ones I wanted to mention real quick here were the annual report. Arthur has agreed to help me pull that together this year, and we will be pulling together the reports from each of the 5 committees or task forces as well as part of that, as we did last year.
Remind me again as the time approaches.
Yeah, that's the June project. And then the volunteer appreciation event is also going to be scheduled for June. And we know we have at least 1 outgoing council member, so yes. We'll want to thank you as well as all of the committee volunteers. And the last thing that did not make my list is we have notified Billy Veers that we have approved the curb painting, and we will be scheduling the curb painting in front of fire hydrants shortly. There is 1 fire hydrant at least that is adjacent to a curb on Brookville sidewalk, which means we'll probably need to wait for the new curb to be put in before we can paint that one. But otherwise, we're gonna schedule that shortly.
Is that going to be? You mentioned the speed bumps, the yellow ones turn to white as well, and that.
Yes, we will be correcting the color of the
So
the
there will be
stripes.
uniform speed bump stripes.
Yeah, and instead of the stripes will be removed. Those yellow stripes will be removed on turn lane, and then we will do a white chevron. That's what they call that shape.
Yeah.
So it matches all the other ones around the town. That is included in that same contract. Yes, and the building stuff right now, we don't have any active permit applications, but there's at least 2 that are coming for slight things. 7202 Delfield Street needs to submit a survey to complete their application, and then 6515 Brookville is making slight alterations to their upper story, and we're waiting for those plans. So that concludes my report.
Good. Any questions, comments? Okay, Jeff, you had some things you wanted to say about the variance proposals. Processes.
I appreciate it. I know we're at the end, and but also I really appreciate Karen. You're here, and you had mentioned, and so appreciate you're here, and I know that both Karen but other residents had provided some inputs, and I also want to share that this is being shared as an opportunity, knowing that we are hiring a new technical engineer, but also, and as Yasmina is here and as Elizabeth is still online, because the task order, I keep saying that, the task force for the stormwater, now committee, we're going to be doing quite a few things with our code, and we're going to be looking at some things, and there's going to be, as we know, a constant churn in terms of development. And we will continue to be pushed as a council to probably perhaps look at some new variances on the way, where there may be things that are actually very explicitly handled by our code. Or as we know, I saw Doug and Hiromi were on in Zoom, there may be things that were or will be in gray areas. And so this is really just that opportunity to look at what are the things that we could address from an administration and process to really perhaps get like an SOP down or to tweak and strengthen. So let me just do this. And, this is more of, I don't want to go through every single point. Oh, that's interesting, because on mine, it looks like a presenter view, but there it looks like slides. And Arthur can attest to that.
Yeah.
But anyway, because I know it's been long, but it's interesting. Well, sorry, folks. Let's try this. Aha.
No, it went to it and then came back.
All right, let's try that again. Sorry. Right, Arthur, you can see, you can attest to.
Yeah, no, you had
It
done.
doesn't matter.
Yeah, go ahead.
Right.
We can see it.
We
I
see
can
it.
see it.
It's not switching though. All right.
There we go.
You try it once more, see if that works.
He doesn't want to go.
Okay. So there are 3 slides here, and they cover a couple areas and topics. First, let's look at the context. I already mentioned the idea we're going to be onboarding a new engineer consultant and the stormwater task force. So this is an inflection opportunity for us to evaluate and strengthen the current process and procedures. And so part of that, there's a couple of bullet points here. Process and governance. So for example, other municipalities, the idea, what are the opportunities for early council input into more complex applications?
So wait a minute, what are we talking, what's the subject?
The subject of this is basically presenting both best practice.
For variances, for building applications, for what?
For variances is also as well as permits.
Okay, permits and variances.
Yes.
Oh, okay. Not just variances.
Well, it's mostly focusing on variances, but you'll see on the next slide, there's a place where it also can fit for permits.
Okay, okay.
And so again, the idea that there could be some early council input, because in the current process, we get a lot of information really days before, and there would be, I think, a real opportunity, as long as it fits within the guidelines and legality of having a council member who could be appointed. In other municipalities, that is the case, where they're appointed to the permitting and variance sort of administrative apparatus. And so that there is some input early on from a council member, not the whole council, but if there's something that is unusual or a very complex case, there can be a council member who might be there who could provide some input. So that's just a piece of it. And again, that timeline, the ability to absorb information, have information. And the other piece of that is, you know, being able to ask questions. Right now, there's a process where we get information, but we are really unable to discuss.
Exactly.
And that creates a lot of challenges as well for council members, because again, there are things that a lot of that you'd like to discuss. There may be things that you see that you have questions about, but you can't do that until, in this case, a variance hearing. And so I think that there are things that we could do. There are other municipalities that have a process where there is and can be some council member input. And then, of course, if there are complaints or concerns around the administration, around whether or not something should be delayed for things that are outside the actual technical components of the actual variance, then is there a process where the council actually can take a complaint and can they address that versus the idea of what are the technical considerations of that actual variance? And we've seen that before, whether it's because not all council members were present, or there may have been some other aspects of this, and we were not able to make or field those complaints. And so the question becomes, is that something for us to look at? The next piece of this is, again, the technical and the hearing practices. So first, and something that we've seen, we've had residents share with us an opportunity around the worksheets for the permits and variances. This gets to your point, Arthur, is this only variances? So we know historically speaking, and Gina shared this, but there are other also municipalities of what are the worksheets and what are the calculations? And are those things that we could have that are very clear, that they're transparent, and not only for the variances, but also for the permitting. And again, are there any QC pieces around this? Because again, not saying that these have been right or wrong, but there have been questions about whether or not the calculations were either done correctly, or can we actually have the calculations in front of us on a worksheet? And again, this is an opportunity for us to say going forward, what are the worksheets that are being used, and can we post them so people could see the calculations in advance? And there's no questions about that. And the other piece of this, which is, you know, we'll get to the final slide, is there may be, as we know, prior permits and prior variances that have been passed. And so as part of a hiring process, be good to maybe do a purposeful sample of some of those as a review to get some inputs of how could we have improved those, or are there any other inputs or worksheets that could have accompanied those, both for residents and council, that we may not have, or again, that others may be using. And then the hearing structure, I think we've heard. This is something around the idea of, are the comments that are coming in, are they focused on the actual specific technical, in this case, the variance? Are they focused on the issue at hand?
Mhm.
And, you know, sometimes we'll get a lot of comments that may be beyond that specific point. And again, it's sensitive and I don't have answers. This is not something where it's more of just putting out there, are there ways that we could somehow manage the meetings in a way that we keep it on point and it is on that particular issue? And then that gets to the moderation, and then around the voting procedures of just, you know, how are those votes handled? And again, this happened for me as well. There have been times I've been out of town and the question is, can you do an absentee vote? And if not, then again, how do we handle that? Particularly these variance hearings, some are relatively small, others are much bigger around big development. And if it comes down to the idea that you can have a tie or a vote really does matter, then we just need to kind of think about, is it worth a delay, or how do we handle that? And I'm not saying that we have answers on this, and do I have them, but just putting those things out so that because we are hiring a new engineer, these are good questions to pose, and just is a time to us to refresh and look at some of these things. And then the last point, just where could we make some target improvements and next steps? So again, I already mentioned the front end. Could we introduce early touch points or earlier for the council or a representative of the council so that they could be part of the process, particularly for maybe very complex applications or new builds? And again, the worksheets, I know we have some, but can we perhaps upgrade around calculations so that residents just can see that? We don't have to have the same questions about, well, who calculated it? How do we know? The technical quality, this is, an interesting point, is do we have a QC, a redundant for very complex things? Is there a way to get a second pair of eyes? And then I already mentioned the hearing piece and the format and the moderation. And then the final around the engineering, and this I believe would be very helpful around this onboarding of a new engineer, that this is all part of this process. I know that Michael, please comment, but, oh, sorry.
Cut that up.
What was that?
It didn't, the second slide wasn't on there either. It's, in the interest of time, just don't worry.
There it is. Okay, yeah, sorry, there's a disconnect.
Okay.
So then the final piece is, Michael, I know you have these points, but this seems to be part of the process of bringing on someone new. It will give us this chance to go through the SOPs, the templates, and really just dust things off in a way. Does that make sense? So with that said, I'll turn it over, and I do want to defer. I see Karen hung around for this, and if there are others who wanted to input, and then, Michael, please, I welcome your thoughts.
Any comments, thoughts?
I think it's really necessary that we go through this process.
One of the things about the variance hearings themselves is that they're conducted like a trial, and that when in a trial, you can't control what the prosecution and the defense are going to say. They have their own way of looking at it. And then we're sitting back as the jury reviewing what they're saying. So I think that's one way to look at it.
And they aren't necessarily ex parte. I mean, we are not allowed to have ex parte communications, which would
at that point.
But I want to push on that. And again, this isn't the time to resolve it.
Yeah.
Right.
But there are other best practices in other municipalities where there are inputs early on from council members. End of story. So we need to have an understanding of how the council members have an ability, particularly if they feel that they have questions, or if they see something that they need to input on, how to address that. And again, if there are complaints coming in from residents about process that are no fault to anyone, they're not finger pointing, that as council members, the idea of fielding a complaint, how do we talk about that? So just to have, and I say this with respect, but for folks to say, sorry, no talking, no nothing until you get to that meeting really does not benefit our community, and it doesn't benefit our council, and it doesn't benefit the residents who are really directly affected. And again, this is not trying to transform something in a way that is beyond doable. There are other municipalities that do it a bit differently, and I think that we can understand how they do that so that we can strengthen it a bit.
So everything as far as the showing the calculations about the advance notice of the actual plans with the calculations on them, the worksheet, that is a public document that we do those for every single project. It's on the back of the permit itself. Of the permit application itself. So it is part of the same permit application is the worksheet. So all of that is absolutely a process that I want to improve and want whoever the next building permit administrator is to be running that entire process. So I want notices to go out way faster than they do right now. I want the adjacent neighbors to be aware that something is going to be happening before I even receive an application. I do receive like information, like someone calls me and says, "Hey, what's your ADU rules?" You know, or "Hey, I got one today. Hey, well, there's a retaining wall that's falling down in my backyard. Can you come look at it tomorrow?" Sure, I can come look at it. I don't know what that's going to mean. I don't know what permit. I don't know even who's responsible for that retaining wall yet. But I have a flag. I have a sticky note on my desk. There's no reason why that can't turn into a notice that goes out to everybody. So everyone's aware. Everyone on the council should be aware of what's going on at all these different addresses. And we can even have an online ticker board of just here's all the different, you know, tickets that are open right now. Potential building permit coming from this address. You know, all of that type of a notice stuff, automating that process, all of that stands for huge improvement. So that's going to take time, and obviously we have to get the right person in here to manage that.
And so this is the last, because I already took up a lot of real estate and time, so I appreciate everyone. And Arthur, I appreciate you welcoming this discussion for us. None of this is finger pointing. We're not, because we're all part of this, and it's just that this is an opportunity, and recognizing, again, seeing still Elizabeth, Yasmina, folks from the task force, we know that things will continue to push the envelope, and that the developers and also personal property owners, they want to do as much as they can for their young families, and I respect all of that. It's just, it's going to be coming at us faster than our code can ever deal with. And so really just the question becomes, you know, like you said, this is an opportunity to strengthen. We have a new inflection point that may come every decade, frankly. And, you know, let's do what we can, and recognizing that now's the time to do it.
Yeah. Okay, we are nearing the end here. We have a couple of residents left. I see a hand raised. Two hands raised. Yasmina.
Thank you, Arthur. I think Marty was first, so I'm going to let her go first.
Okay, Marty.
Yasmina, go ahead.
Okay, okay, so I'll be quick. First of all, to the last point of discussion, thank you, Jeff, for your candor and for the excellent suggestions you made regarding improving the process for permits and variances. As a resident who has participated in quite a few meetings about permits, I do think the process can be greatly improved. So I appreciate you introducing this as a starting point. And also just want to draw your attention to the bullet point in the action plan for the stormwater pertaining to the permitting process, and a recommendation for information to be shared with residents a lot faster. I think currently our local code defines the need to share that information as prompt, which is kind of loose. And so I think we need a better process, and we need to be clear about what we're collecting and what we're sharing. And you also made some excellent points about how to run those hearings when there's a hearing about a permit or a variance. We're all guilty. I've definitely been guilty about it's easier to get hot under your bonnet when you're dealing with a developer than when you're dealing with a neighbor, but we're all guilty of that. So appreciate your suggestions. I want to thank Michael for sending out the directory. I love the directory. I love having the paper copy and being able to look things up. As you guys know, I work on the listserv. We periodically get requests from all kinds of spammers from all over the world trying to join the listserv, and that directory saves us a lot of time. So love having it. If the village were to consider, I know I've suggested this before, but I'm going to suggest again, if we were to consider bringing it online and making it easier for folks to access from their phones, that would be a really, really wonderful improvement. and definitely I would use that a lot as a resident. I know there are ways to make it secure. PTAs do it all the time with the most sensitive data in the world, which is our children's information. So I think Murphy's Editions can be successful at that. And then my last point, I love the tree program. Michael, you're putting out an RFP for it. Thank you for looking at different growers. Just a quick pitch is to really focus on the maintenance of our trees. I have observed on Shepherd Street a number of trees that were damaged with the snow removal this winter. Just huge gashes into the root systems, which is going to be a problem in terms of viruses for the trees. So that's one issue. We've got a lot of shoots that need to be cut back and trees been maintained. And then just lastly, with the planting, we also need to figure out how to have the person who plants the tree come back and remove the stakes. It's generally not recommended to stake trees because it does weaken their root system, and we don't want to keep them for more than a year. So just that's a quick note in passing.
Good
And
point.
thank you. Great,
Yeah.
great work that you're doing on,
Okay.
on the trees. Thank you.
Thank you. Marty?
I just want to thank you all for all the good work here tonight. It's been one of the most productive meetings I've seen in a long time, and I thank everybody, especially the stormwater folks. But Jeff, your comments and suggestions, I hadn't seen your slides till tonight when you just put them up, about improving the public process. I think that's really important because that removes so much tension. If people know what's coming, have an opportunity to have input into it, have time to read it and think about it, and have opportunities to talk about it before decisions are made, that goes a long way to building community trust and harmony. It's really important. And so thank you for focusing on that. I think that the stormwater people did that. The process on that was really a model in terms of input. And one other final thing, this is just procedural. When you have a hearing on anything, whether it's an ordinance or a variance or whatever, and the council makes a decision that same night, it creates an impression that the council really hasn't taken the time to seriously consider what residents may say at the hearing, because you have the decisions maybe 20 minutes after the hearing. And that doesn't sound like you took, again, I'm not casting aspersions at all, I'm just saying appearances. It gives the appearance that the decision makers are not actually giving themselves time to really take seriously what the residents may have said. And I think that's a false impression, because I think this council really does try to take very seriously what residents have to say. It would help, just as a simple protocol, to have a hearing where you get community input, whether it's a permit or a resident or an ordinance, and then give the council 2 weeks or 10 days or something, so that you actually would have time to take it seriously. And moreover, you would give the perception that you do listen seriously, that you're not sort of going through the motions of, oh, there's a hearing and 20 minutes later, we're going to make a decision. Do you see what I'm saying? Does that make sense to people, that the perception there is that
And
if
maybe
you only have 20 minutes to consider it, how seriously are you taking it? Does that make sense?
Hey, Marty, I agree that the perception might exist, and maybe at the beginning of variance hearings, Michael or whoever would explain the council has been given all the information, the documentation, the plans far in advance, and has reviewed. Each council member has had time, a week, two, maybe more, to review. And then based on the conversation at this variance hearing, we'll make these determinations. Also, keep in mind, there are residents that have been sitting and waiting for these variances to be approved, and you know, are spending a lot of money to improve their homes or whatever it is. So waiting another 10 days, 14 days because of a perception issue might not be the right decision here. So I think just explaining that to folks, or you know, whatever format we want to do it, but we do get all the information. We can review it for quite some time, and so the hearing is not pro forma, but it's you know, us hearing from the folks that are impacted by these variances, both the homeowners and the neighbors.
So you do get input from the neighbors ahead of time?
Yeah. Oh, yes. We got a full dossier. Yeah.
Okay, because that's not always apparent to the residents.
Oh.
The residents only see the public hearing. They don't know what you've got in the way of paperwork beyond the formal application. So we haven't seen other residents' comments on, a project or proposal. And we don't know what's out there. In other words, we don't know what you were
I
making.
think
Your just
post those.
Make sense?
We mentioned it at the beginning of the meeting of what is included in the public record. Every email communication, every written communication that we have is entered in the public record, and both the council and the applicants have a chance to see those as a matter of process.
But do other residents have a chance to see that whole file?
Yes,
No.
yes, it's all
Well, I guess-
public record.
It's posted.
Okay. Maybe it's just a matter of communication then. Just let residents know where that material is so they have a chance to read it before you actually get to the night of the hearing. Maybe it's just a communication. That's a simple fix. But
Yeah.
thank you very much for looking at the process here, because that kind of public transparency really is important and it goes a long way. And I want to thank this council for taking those process issues very seriously. Transparency makes a big difference. Thank you. And again, thank you for the sidewalk project. That's terrific. And Michael, thank you as always for all your work with the election committee in terms of getting things mailed and done. And we appreciate the work of this entire council and the entire staff. So thank you.
Thanks, Marty. I do want to say, Marty, I think the election process is going very well this year. So thank you for all your hard work.
Good.
Oh, it is a lot of work, and you're welcome. Yes.
Okay.
Absolutely.
We have a council member, Susan Faddick, who has requested time to speak to the council and to the
Actually, I
community.
was offered time. I
You're
did
offered-
not solicit
Oh,
it, just to
okay.
be clear.
I
I am
want-
not one of
well,
those people who's
I'm
trying
sorry.
to.
In
claim all
introducing Susan, I want to note, she is the second longest serving council member. She was chair during the beginning of the COVID pandemic, when we had more than 80 people signed in on monthly meetings
Oh,
on
yeah.
Zoom, all of them angry.
Angry is an understatement.
And
Really?
Susan was there as the face of the community at that time. So, and one other thing I have to say, I think that in all the votes where we have disagreed, Susan and I have probably disagreed the most on votes. And yet she's the one I turn to for advice first on most issues. So even though we have disagreed formally on many votes, I still welcome her views.
Thanks, Arthur.
Susan.
Okay. Whether with respect to farewell speeches or village council meetings, Shakespeare nailed it. Brevity is the soul of wit. It's been my distinct privilege for over a decade to serve alongside many public servants, elected and appointed alike, who have been genuinely committed to bettering our community, not merely pandering to the crowd or seeking self-aggrandizement. As a council member, I've met neighbors from every corner of Martin's Additions and gotten to know many of you who I otherwise may not have. Working with our great staff and my colleagues has been an incomparable experience. As always, I wish the council the best. I'll be participating in the next 2 meetings, and from July forward, we'll be eagerly watching from the other side of the council table. And that's how you do it. Short and semi-sweet.
So
Wow. You were done.
I was done. That's short
Good.
and sweet.
And it's a much more friendly audience tonight than it was during
Oh,
COVID.
yes, incomparable.
Okay, with that,
Immeasurably.
do we have any comments?
I move to adjourn.
We have a motion to adjourn. We have a second. Do we have a vote? Aye. Thank you, everybody. We are now adjourned.